The man who is, or the person, there's no necessarily a man, the person's doing it to you, who do you think this is that is threatening you?
I think it's someone just trying to see if I can identify the man that I believe that killed Darlene, that I got to see on 8 different occasions.
So you don't think it's the Zodiac killer?
There's been some of them that's really frightened me. I believe maybe the last thing that happened to me could have been him.
So you're talking 20 years later.
Bits and pieces of information, leads and tips from people who want to help catch the Zodiac killer have been pouring into police headquarters here at the Hall of Justice for the last few days. A new team of detectives has been added to the homicide detail in an effort to sift some of that information. Police are now convinced that it was the killer of a San Francisco cab driver who sent in a swatch of bloody cloth with a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle. Laboratory tests on the cloth, torn from the shirt of Paul Stein, prove that it came, in fact, from the cab driver when he was murdered last Saturday night in Presidio Heights. And handwriting analysis of a foreboding letter indicates the writer is the same man who's committed 5 murders, 1 here, 3 in Vallejo, and 1 in Napa over the last 10 months. A composite drawing sketched in 4 hours from witnesses' descriptions has been widely publicized. People tend to forget, however, that it is not necessarily an accurate portrayal of the killer's likeness, just a translated remembrance of a brief look at his face. All of the letters sent by the killer have been posted from San Francisco, and police believe the man either works or lives in the city. His chilling allusions to future slayings are being countered with an intense drive to prevent him from fulfilling any promises. Dick Carlson reporting for Newsbeat from San Francisco Hall of Justice.
Take the threat seriously. The psychotic killer has already murdered 5. 1 at a lover's lane near a lake just north of San Francisco. 3 others in nearby Vallejo. The latest, a taxi driver in San Francisco. The Zodiac killer seems to crave publicity. The Zodiac killer seems to crave publicity.
Homicide that took place out on a county road about sometime after 11 o'clock last night. A double homicide involving
Vallejo Police Department.
I want to report a double murder.
May I have your
You go
name?
1 mile east on Columbus Parkway, public park. You'll find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye.
But he told
that he had killed a guard getting out of a prison, and so I did take him as a killer. To me, a killer isn't a normal person, so I assumed at the time that something was wrong. But as far as a psychopath, or this came out since then. But he told me at that time that he had killed a guard getting out of a prison, and so I did take him as a killer. To me, a killer isn't a normal person, so I assumed at the time that something was wrong. He wanted our money. And I actually laughed at the moment because I told him, I says, I've only got 75 cents in my pocket. And I says, you're welcome to have it. But if you need help, I'm sure we can.
Accompanied by police and newsmen, waited 45 minutes today to keep a rendezvous with San Francisco's Zodiac killer of 5 persons. The man who made the appointment never showed up. The meeting was arranged this morning when a caller, identifying himself as Sam, reached Belli on a KGO-TV talk show. He said he was the Zodiac killer and needed help. Here's how it looked and sounded. Talk to us. Just tell us what's going on inside you right now, Sam, please.
I have headaches.
Right. How long have you had those headaches, Sam?
In a long time, since I killed a kid.
Well, was it before December that you had the headaches?
Yes.
Were you in service that you might have had an injury in service? Did you ever fall out of a tree or downstairs? Were you ever unconscious?
I don't know.
You don't remember. Does aspirin do you any good?
No.
Doesn't do any good. Sam, long stuff never did me any good either when I had it. Sam, let me ask you a question. Did you attempt to call this program one other time when Mr. Belli was with us? And you what? Did you try to call us one other time about two or 3 weeks ago when Mel Belli was with us?
Yes.
And you, well, then we couldn't get through. Couldn't get through. The phones were tied up. Was that it?
Yes.
Sam, let me ask you this. There's some reason why you go to a particular doctor or a particular priest, and some reason why apparently you wanted to talk to me or Lee. Is it that you feel that we have compassion for people who get in trouble? Or is it you feel that we can do something for you? Or is it you feel that we have enough integrity that if we promise you something, that we're going to stick to it? Well, let's find out why he wanted to talk to. Why did you want to talk to Mr. Belli, Sam?
I don't want to be hurt.
I don't want to be hurt.
Conclusive enough to link the murderer of Celia Shepard to other murders in the Vallejo area in the past year.
Anywhere in the Bay Area or anywhere, he should go to the nearest law enforcement agency and turn himself in. And we will try to do whatever we can to help this man.
Does it seem to you as if you're pretty much on the verge of finding this man?
Well, I wouldn't want to say that, Dave. We're hoping. We've got some good things working for us, but it takes time. And to be able to reach out and pluck this guy out of the air isn't done. In most murder cases, you'll find a motive. But of course, this guy is just a killer, a mad killer, and you have no motive. So it makes it a little bit harder for us to track him down.
It's also fairly obvious that the man greatly enjoys the publicity that surrounds this thing. And there's a chance that man could be watching this interview.
That's true.
What would you have to say to this man?
About the only thing I could say to him I think he realizes he needs help. I'm sure he does. And I'm sure he realizes what he's doing. And this is, to me, it's a sex crime. He's doing this for gratification. And I feel that he should definitely seek aid at any agency that he wants to go to in law enforcement.
Early last Saturday evening, Celia Shepard and Brian Hartnell, both in their early 20s, were sitting on this knoll of land overlooking part of Lake Berryessa. They thought they were alone, but there was a third man on this knoll, a man who wore a medieval-style executioner's hood, carried a knife and gun, and intended to use them. In speaking with one of the deputies who was investigating this thing, he said that the first thing you told a deputy out there was to give some idea of a description of the man. Do you understand now how your mind was able to work that well under those conditions? You really did an exceptional job in that.
Well, through the whole thing, like I mentioned before, at the beginning, I did think I was going to die. And so from that moment on, one has to have certain goals that you have to set. The first goal, of course, was to live. I suppose the second goal was to get untied. The next one was to get help. From getting help, getting to the hospital. You know, you have to have a successive set of goals. And if you can keep this going and you can keep your mind active, whether you die or not, you're at least psychologically attuned, whether you're in shock or not. If you can keep arguing with yourself, praying, doing anything to keep your mind off of yourself, or at least just not lapsing back and just saying, well, it's no use.
Police Department. I want to report a murder. No. A double murder. They are 2 miles north of target headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Carbon Gia. I'm the one that did it.
Brian will probably be able to leave Queen of the Valley Hospital fairly soon. But where he's going from here is being kept secret in the event that the man who attacked him and killed Cecilia Shepard on Lake Berryessa a week ago Saturday tries again. Brian made it for 2 reasons some people might regard as intangibles, but reasons that for him were enough. A strong faith and an equally strong will to live. Dave Monsees, Eyewitness News, at Queen of the Valley Hospital, Napa. You know that this man is still at large, and that there is a better than average possibility that this could be the same man who was involved in 4 murders over in Vallejo. Can you think of anything that you might want to tell that man at all?
I considered him a robber. I had absolutely no thought that he was anything but that. And when we were at this robbery stage, I didn't consider any real threat to my life or to the girl or anything. I really didn't consider this, but I really wanted to help him. And
Did he seem as though he would like your help at all?
No, he didn't, and he didn't even end up taking the money. But I
There's no grudge?
Well, of course not. I don't think that he was acting under his total complete consciousness.
I don't think that he was acting acting under his total complete consciousness.
When a man is, if you don't mind using the word sick, you can't hold this against them. But the real concern that I have is that he doesn't do this again. I'd like to see some people save this experience.
San Francisco was terrorized in the late 60s and early 70s by a man who called himself the Zodiac Killer. He claimed 37 murders. Police confirmed at least 6. 4 years ago, the killing stopped, and so did Zodiac's letter. Now there's another letter. For that, Tom Shell.
San Francisco police displayed a blackboard with excerpts of the latest Zodiac letter at a news conference last night. Police are convinced it's authentic. Deputy San Francisco Police Chief Clem D'Amica said it's the 16th letter received from the Zodiac Killer and the first since 1974. Letter number 16 has breathed new life into the investigation of at least 6 murders blamed on the Zodiac. Old files will be reviewed again. For the last 9 years, the Zodiac investigation has been headed by Homicide Inspector David Toski.
I have always felt a gut feeling that he was not dead and that he was out there somewhere and that he would communicate. I was always hoping that he would communicate and not commit an act. A letter I can handle.
The latest letter from the Zodiac poses more questions than it answers. Questions like, why has he only communicated twice in the past 9 years? Has he killed in that time? No clues in the latest letter. But more importantly, who is the Zodiac and where is he?
More importantly, who is the Zodiac and where is he?
I've had 11 years patrolling this lake, and I've seen a lot of people cut up by boat accidents and this, but this is one of the worst things I ever witnessed. For no reason at all. Just a hooded man came up with a pistol drawn on him, tied him up, and then told him he had to kill him. So
This guy is a pathological psycho killer. There's no doubt about it.
Is there any doubt in your mind that there is or is not any connection between Vallejo and where he is?
This we're sifting out now. I wouldn't say that there is any connection, yet I wouldn't want to tell you that there isn't at this time. We have some pretty good physical evidence that we're working on now. Mm-hmm. And of course, we're going to get together with the Vallejo authorities. We've been in contact with them since the incident, and we definitely will pool our resources.
Offenders, when they commit crimes, can't help but give us clues about who they are, where they've been, what their prior relationships look like, what their future relationships are likely to look like. So those kinds of things can give us very important clues in how to search for him and how he's likely to behave when we encounter him, which is also very important. I worked on the Zodiac case a number of times during my service to the California Department of Justice. I worked with the detectives from various agencies that are involved in the case, some more than others, and I had read many of the reports before I was asked to take another look at it rather recently. Well, I think I have better ideas currently on some things that could be done. I think I have a clearer vision of the kind of person that we're actually looking for. I have changed my mind about what might possibly have happened to the Zodiac after he dropped out of sight in 1974. Well, we're looking for somebody who very much was capable of keeping a secret. I don't think that this individual is the type of person who needed to confide in another person. He was very much a loner. I think it's important to note that these crimes occurred on the weekends or on holidays. He was a weekend offender, and that shows us that he was employed Monday through Friday, and And he was very busy during those days. He was not free to commit crimes. He was not free to hunt for victims. So he lived a structured life, and then Monday through Friday, and then on weekends, he seems to have been adrift. And I think he spent a great deal of time driving around and looking and hunting and fantasizing about what he was going to do when he got the opportunity. I think another important point here is that the time between crimes decreased significantly. If you look at the pattern, the first crime occurred on December 20th of 1968. The second crime occurred on July 4th, 1969. The next crime, September 27th. So we're looking at a shorter period of time. The next crime on October 11th, only 2 weeks. And so again, this supports the likelihood that the Zodiac's confidence level is increasing very rapidly over the course of these 10 and a half months. And then he basically is done.
The Zodiac Killer has haunted California's consciousness for more than 20 years. A mass murderer making his mark in the 60s by killing, then sending letters taunting police. Thousands of people have been interviewed, and the Zodiacs bounced in and out of the news. And through it all, there's been one constant: Arthur Allen.
I'm not the Zodiac Killer. I know that. I know that deep in my soul.
But Allen says the cops don't believe him. Allen says he's been a prime suspect off and on for 20 years, and now it's on again. Last February, the Vallejo police searching his home, he says. And now he says he's about had it.
I've never been known for good luck, and I guess this is pretty much living proof of it.
Now, Allen's no angel. He admits that. Says he's been busted for child molestation, served time, knows he was wrong. But whatever coincidences making him look like the Zodiac, he says are only that, coincidences.
Just point blank, are you a murderer?
No.
Are you the Zodiac Killer?
No, definitely not. No. I couldn't murder anyone.
How do you live with this?
It's difficult as hell, and it can be terribly depressing. And if I deserved any of it, that would be something different, but I don't.
Michael Finney, Channel 7 News Tonight.
The man who is, or the person, there's no necessarily a man, the person's doing it to you, who do you think this is that is threatening you?
I think it's someone just trying to see if I can identify the man that I believe that killed Darlene, that I got to see on 8 different occasions.
So you don't think it's the Zodiac Killer?
There's been some of them that's really frightened me. I believe maybe the last thing that happened to me could have been him.
So you're talking 20 years later, you think this person is still around and that he may be doing it to you?
I believe a few of them he has. I believe the last thing that he did by coming into my house and knocking me out 3 days before I'm to go on to the show and to steal all the stuff that I had in an envelope to send to your show, I believe he had something to do with that, if not him. I was knocked out. The last thing I remember saying was, "Oh my God." And I don't remember anything after that.
And still the police say this is not so?
We got to where we weren't, my husband and I were not calling the police anymore. We were taking care of the things ourselves.
We got to where we weren't, my husband and I were not calling the police anymore. We were taking care of the things ourselves.
A comment about this?
Well, personally, when I hear stories like this, you worry about what to do. We always talk about, well, the police don't do anything. I call them and they don't come. Well, there's only so much the police can do
They said
until some harm has been committed. It's sad but true. I I kind of think that it's probably better to be a live chicken than a dead duck, and I would suggest that people in the situation move. I know you don't want to be a victim. You don't want to feel like you have to move because someone is terrorizing you, but it's better to be somewhere else, far away from the Bay Area if possible, and be alive.
I did. I'll move.
He called himself the Zodiac Killer, and for years he terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area with his brutal murders. To this day, he has eluded authorities, but now, one determined cop says he knows exactly who the killer is and where he's hiding.
Determined cop says he knows exactly who the killer is and where he's hiding.
Now, 25 years later, this man says he's finally tracked down the killer.
There is no question in my mind that my suspect is a Zodiac. Every fiber, every part of my being tells me that he is the Zodiac Killer.
And in this hard copy exclusive, the surveillance tape of the man who may be the most famous serial murderer in U.S. history, the Zodiac.
When I looked at that picture, that was him. I mean, it just was. I knew that.
This woman would know. She looked the killer straight in the eye and lived to tell about it.
His car started flashing its lights behind me. I got out of the car and came up and he said my back wheel was wobbly and he could fix it.
Little did she know this gesture from the Good Samaritan was typical of the killer's M.O.
He went back and he fiddled around and came back and said fine and drove off. And then when I pulled off, the tire fell off.
It was the most terrifying 2 hours of Kathy's life, but somehow she managed to escape. It was only at the police department that Kathy realized she'd been abducted by the Zodiac Killer.
I looked up and there's a picture on the wall of the guy I just spent time with.
Kathy may have identified the Zodiac, but back then there were many suspects. After all, this was the most bizarre killing spree California had ever seen. A madman brutally murdering innocent victims. But what really gave the killer his distinctive place in America's criminal gallery was his use of deliberate clues. His cruel and bizarre letters taunting the victims' families, police, and the media. Or a dogged detective named Harvey Hines would bring Kathy out of the shadows. He says it's her eyewitness account that proves his suspect is in fact the Zodiac.
She saw him and put her finger down on the picture and said that was him. And she said, it's not only my eyes telling me, it's my stomach too.
Detective Hines also zeroed in on this woman. Her sister, Darlene Farron, was killed by the Zodiac in 1969. She remembers Darlene being terrified of a new stranger in town.
She said that she seen him do something. She seen him kill someone. She told me to stay away from him. He was a bad man.
A week later, Darlene was dead. The stranger disappeared, but Pam never forgot the man her sister warned her about. The man she's convinced is the murderer.
I want the man that killed my sister brought to justice.
We can't show you his face or tell you his name because he's not officially a suspect. But Detective Hines says these and other witnesses have convinced him he's finally solved the Zodiac mystery.
I think Harvey's guy is the strongest suspect they've ever had.
You may recall an intensive, now it can be told, investigation revealed that San Francisco's infamous Zodiac Killer did not choose his victims at random as the police originally believed. We discovered evidence showing involvement with drugs, the occult, and even the grim possibility of an accomplice. Well, we've continued to look into this 20-year-old mystery, and now we've zeroed in on the one man who may actually know the identity of the maniac. Our Alexander Johnson picks up the trail with the help of one of the victim's sisters.
Carlo, the most important finding in our first report was that Zodiac knew at least one of his victims, a 22-year-old waitress named Darlene Farron. There was a motive behind her killing, which means there is a trail that could finally lead to the capture of the elusive Zodiac. In the late 60s and early 70s, a deranged phantom calling himself the Zodiac wrote taunting letters to the California press and police. He typically struck at night in deserted lovers' lanes. But in one instance, he executed a cab driver on a San Francisco street. And in another, he donned the ritual costume and ravaged 2 students with a knife near a lake in broad daylight. There were 5 known dead and maybe more, and 2 seriously wounded. Numerous police jurisdictions were involved in the manhunt. We focus on Zodiac's second attack, the murder of Darlene Ferrin, and the wounding of her companion, Mike Majot, shot in a golf course parking lot in the San Francisco suburb of Vallejo at midnight on July 4th, 1969. Now investigative reporter Maury Terry.
Someone Darlene knew and feared had been following her around Vallejo for months, and that last night she had an argument in the parking lot outside the restaurant where she worked with an unidentified man. From there, she hurried home and then rushed over to Mike Majot's house, from where the 2 were followed or maybe even chased out to that parking lot where the shooting went down. It certainly was not a random hit, and it seems pretty clear that Mike Majot may know much more than he has told the police.
Majot has been in hiding for more than 20 years. We obtained this exclusive undercover video after months of tracking him. In an emotional and dramatic meeting, Darlene Ferrin's sister, Pam Huckabee, approached a man she hadn't seen in more than 2 decades.
Hi, Mike. Do you remember me? Come here. I'm Darlene's sister, Pam. I'd like to talk to you. You know, Mike, there was a man that Darlene was very afraid of. That hung around Darlene. That I got to meet. That I got to see around her. And I believe you know who he is. Do you?
Yeah, a lot of that's been so long ago. I don't remember a lot of those names.
It took me all this time to find you. And I want you to help me. I know you can. You can't tell me you can't. You can't tell me you can't, Mike. I know you know who did it. I know you did.
But Majot was not helpful. Retired San Francisco homicide inspector John Patino.
It doesn't appear to be a random killing because from the witness, the perpetrator went up to her side of the door, on the driver's side, and called her D, which was her nickname apparently.
And Ed Rust, who worked on Darlene's case, now believes she was a target hit.
I can almost see it as quite likely a plan, a methodical plan to cover up not only Darlene's, but is quite likely that some of these other Zodiac killings, to my way of thinking, may have involved other motives, and they were done in such a manner as to make it appear a random killing.
Item: 90 minutes before she was shot, Darlene argued with an unidentified man outside Terry's restaurant. Item: returning home, Darlene's babysitter told her an older man had been phoning her all evening. Item: an ominous note in Darlene's handwriting was found by her phone. She had scrawled the words, hacked, stuck, testified. Item: Darlene rushed to Mike Majot's home from where the pair was followed to the murder scene.
Darlene had to have been lured into that parking lot the way that she was found. The driver's license in her hand, the ignition of the car still going, the headlights still going. But the car had died. She was deliberate. She was the key to this whole thing. She gave him that name, Zodiac.
Mike Majot survived Zodiac's attack and gave a description of the shooter. However, he later changed key parts of his story, left Vallejo, and has avoided public comment for the past 22 years.
However, he later changed key parts of his story, left Vallejo, and has avoided public comment for the past 22 years.
40 years after San Francisco's notorious Zodiac killings began, a Los Angeles area woman has come forward saying she can solve the case. As Ben Tracy tells us, she claims to be the Zodiac's daughter.
I had no knowledge of the Zodiac killer. Upon seeing the composite, I recognized the individual as my father.
They called him the Zodiac Killer. 40 years ago, the mystery killer terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area, possibly killing as many as 40 people. Now, Deborah Perez, a 47-year-old real estate agent, thinks her adoptive and long-dead father was the killer.
I researched the Zodiac killer, and to my surprise, I found cards and letters in evidence held by the police, which were written by my father or by me.
Perez says her father took her along on some of his killings.
I would hear shots, and he would state that they were firecrackers.
She was just 7 at the time.
All I wanted to do was help my dad. He kept telling me he was sick, that he had killed many, many people.
He would bring back souvenirs, like glasses he took from a cab driver he killed.
I have those glasses.
Police say they'll investigate. Ben Tracy, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Killing is his compulsion.
The case is so bizarre and notorious, it inspired a Hollywood movie in 2007 featuring Robert Downey Jr. and Jake Gyllenhaal.
The Zodiac Killer has come to San Francisco.
More than 40 years later, the mystery has never been solved. And now, one man claims to have indisputable evidence. He knows who the killer is. Gary Stewart, author of a new memoir, The Most Dangerous Animal of All, says the serial killer is his father, Earl Van Best, Jr. Stewart, a Louisiana businessman, made the startling discovery after a 10-year search helped him identify Best as his biological father. This photo shows a striking resemblance between Best and a sketch of the Zodiac Killer. Gary Stewart's father died in 1984, but he says forensic experts have matched his father's handwriting to cryptic notes the killer left behind. So far, San Francisco police have not reviewed the book, but they have investigated and cleared more than 2,500 other suspects. The killer claims he murdered as many as 37 people, but the evidence, including letters and cards the killer sent to the press and swatches of bloody clothing, have baffled detectives. As of today, the Zodiac Killer has only been officially connected to 5 deaths.
I see him pull his knife, and in just kind of in one fell swoop, I feel the knife buried in my back.
Brian Hartnell was stabbed 8 times while he was picnicking with his girlfriend. In 2007, he spoke to CNN's Dan Simon about the attacker.
He had some clip-on glasses that were either affixed to the hood or affixed to glasses underneath. The circle on the chest was a perfectly formed circle.
In an email to CNN, Hartnell says he's skeptical about this latest claim, saying there's been no time in the last 40-plus years when someone was not stirring the pot.
Man says it is, and he's just released a book detailing his findings. He says his very own father is the man behind the horrific serial killings that gripped San Francisco back in the late 60s. And he says he has proof. Now, this is a guy who was looking for his biological father in that search, and through that search, he believes he's come across this evidence that links his biological father to the Zodiac Killer. Well, the first piece of evidence is the picture. Let's take another look, if we can, at that sketch. And here you have the sketch that was given by one of the survivors of one of the attacks. And there's his father. You look at him side by side. Mike Brooks and the Dream Team in with me. Look at him side by side, Mike. I mean, that is uncanny.
Vinny, even down to the mouth and the hair. And the, I mean, it almost looks like it's his twin. It's gotta be.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is the best, some of the best proof, because you have someone, someone that survived, gave a detailed description. That description matches this picture. Now, the backstory of this guy is that he has a child out of wedlock. Apparently gets in trouble for having a child because the mother was underage, so served time for that. Now this guy's tracking down his dad and believes he's found the Zodiac Killer. Another piece of evidence were some of the cryptic messages. And in some of those cryptic messages, the man's son and police, both independently, found the words E.V. Best in those cryptic messages that were left, Mike. And E.V. Best is the name of the man's father.
Exactly, and that in and of itself is scary too, because he left all of these cryptic messages, but E.V. Best Jr., that's him right there, Vinny. And I just can't get over the picture and how close they really are. I've seen a lot of composites and people when they're locked up. That's one of the most accurate composites compared to a picture that I've ever seen.
Now, it still has not been confirmed by anyone, but it's his own son who is saying he believes this is the case. Joey Jackson, your reaction, the book's coming out today. Not a lot of pre-publicity about it, but this was a mystery for so many years, and now perhaps solved.
It would be a fantastic thing if it were. You look at history and you certainly know that ultimately the truth comes out. But do you really, I really want to look deeper and know whether or not we can't just look at a picture and make that determination. There has to be more.
A judge ruled today that prosecutors may collect DNA, fingerprints, and body photographs of the suspected Golden State Killer. 72-year-old Joseph D'Angelo is accused of a string of murders and rapes committed decades ago. A DNA match on a genealogy website led to his arrest, which now has investigators re-examining other cold cases. Here's Carter Evans.
It was an unconventional approach that landed Joseph D'Angelo in court decades after his alleged spree of murders and rapes. Investigators entered evidence from the Golden State Killer's cases into a genealogical database, and through links with several distant relatives, they were able to track down D'Angelo. Now, that same technology could help solve some of California's most notorious cold cases, including the infamous Zodiac Killer murders.
It'll break it wide open.
Jim Jack's has spent most of his career on the Zodiac Task Force, hunting the man who 50 years ago terrorized Northern California. The Zodiac Killer boasted about killing as many as 37 people and taunted police by sending them cryptic letters. If they're able to find a relative of the person who licked that stamp, how big a deal is that?
Oh, it's real big. It's a great place for an investigation to really start.
Detectives are now trying to recover DNA from saliva on the stamps from those very letters, and using genealogy sites gives them a potent new weapon, says DNA expert Monty Miller.
Anytime we can't identify the criminal, if we could identify some of the criminal's relatives, that might give us a very good leg up on solving some of these crimes.
And it's giving new hope for cracking cases that had long gone cold and seemed like they might never be solved.
So this has a lot of potential.
Absolutely. The potential is great.
Now, detectives plan to enter the DNA results from the Zodiac letters into the same database that helped track down the alleged Golden State Killer. If they're successful, this could finally bring some closure for the families of the Zodiac Killer's victims.
Well, tonight, many are now wondering, is the same DNA technology used to identify the East Area rapist could be helping to solve this case? Well, the answer is complicated. DNA evidence wasn't used as it is now when the killings happened back in the 60s, so it wasn't collected, right? However, in 2018, police did submit letters and envelopes from the Zodiac Killer to a private lab to obtain a DNA profile, hoping those envelopes he licked years ago could have some DNA and crack the case. But it's unclear if any usable results were ever uncovered.
Maureen was scrolling through microfilm when she found something unexpected, an unsolved murder. And now the decades-old cold case is raising questions about one of the nation's most infamous unsolved serial killers.
Did the Zodiac Killer get his start in Oceanside? 10 News anchor Derek Stahl reports police are now retesting some old evidence.
The look of the Oceanside community of St. Malo hasn't changed much in decades, and neither has its reputation for upscale living.
Very exclusive neighborhood here in Oceanside. It's home of the rich and famous. Most of the people living here were from Pasadena, Beverly Hills.
And that's why it was so surprising when police found a body in this nearby alley in April 1962.
And this house right here, what was significant about that?
Well, the victim, Ray Davis, was found lying here in the alley. He had been abandoned. And this would have been the home of the former mayor of Oceanside, Mr. McDonald.
29-year-old Ray Davis was a cab driver, shot to death by his last passenger and dumped at the doorstep of Oceanside's most influential.
This is the first article that ran in the Oceanside Blade Tribune, and as you can see, the headline is Oceanside Cabbie Slain.
Oceanside Historical Society President Christy Hawthorne uncovered the forgotten case 2 years ago while researching St. Malo.
Ray Davis radioed and said, I have a fare, I'm taking them to South Oceanside, and then he was never heard from again.
But what really hooked her were cryptic threats the killer made to police.
So on the evening of April 9th, 1962, the Oceanside Police Department received an anonymous telephone call. The unidentified caller stated, I'm going to pull something here in Oceanside and you will never be able to figure it out. And then April 10th, Ray Davis was murdered.
Days later, the gunman called police back, claimed responsibility, and threatened to attack a bus driver next.
After that threat against bus drivers, the city took an unprecedented step. It put armed guards on all city buses and armed military police on buses heading to Camp Pendleton.
When you compare the really unusual similarities between the killer of Ray Davis and the Zodiac, you get these really bizarre
rarely seen characteristics.
Tom Voigt is an expert on the Zodiac killings in Northern California, which started 6.5 years later.
He had training somewhere to be a serial killer, and I really do believe it was in Southern California, and he worked his way north.
He says both cases involved attacks on cab drivers in wealthy neighborhoods, threats against buses, and brazen taunts to police. Ray Davis was shot with a .22 caliber gun with long rifle ammunition, the same caliber and ammunition used in the Zodiac's first Bay Area attack. Voigt says it amounts to a criminal signature.
Two different killers with the same signature in the same state within the same time period. I think it's the same guy doing all the killings.
And then there's the famous sketch of the Zodiac with a crew cut.
Some folks believe that he might have been in the military. Would he have been maybe stationed here in Camp Pendleton and committed the crime here, then went up to Riverside and then later on up north? I'm not saying that it's the Zodiac. I'm just saying there's enough compelling similarities to consider.
Now a team of independent investigators says it has identified the Zodiac killer. KTVU crime reporter Henry Lee joins us now live with some of the new evidence and the doubt that remains. Henry.
Heather, for years there have been many people who have been identified as the notorious Zodiac killer, but this group says they've got the right guy. Another man now identified as the infamous Zodiac killer.
We have 6 people that he told towards his last years that he was the Zodiac.
Tom Colbert is part of a group called the Case Breakers. He says a task force that includes former FBI agents believes Gary Francis Post is the Zodiac. Post died in 2018. Over the years, many other men have been ID'd as the killer.
Hey, everybody has a theory, that's fine. We have evidence that is out the kazoo. It's amazing. I mean, we have tons of evidence.
Among that evidence, they say, a shoe size match, court affidavits from witnesses. The Zodiac was tied to at least 5 killings in the 1960s, including one at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo and others in San Francisco. The group believes Post wrote the coded messages that taunted law enforcement. One tantalizing clue, the killer claimed his name would be hidden in the symbols.
His name is Post. He ended it with the stamp, and they couldn't figure out his last name. He cleverly used the post markings as Gary Francis Stamp. Post.
The group says Post had scars on his forehead from a car crash that matched scars on a sketch of the Zodiac.
That is irrefutable. That is a mark that's the same. It's on him all the way to his death at 80 years old.
Who are we to say yay or nay? San Francisco Chronicle reporter Kevin Fagan's been covering the Zodiac case for years. He says he's now so sure Post is the right guy.
You know, I got an email 2 weeks ago saying that they found Herb Cain's name in the anagram, so Herb Cain must be the Zodiac. Before that, it was Charlie Manson.
Back in December, the FBI confirmed that a Zodiac cipher had been cracked by code breakers. His message said in part, "I hope you're having lots of fun in trying to catch me, and I'm not afraid of the gas chamber." Today, the FBI told me the Zodiac killer case remains open and that there is no new information to share. I got the same response from Vallejo Police and the SFPD.
Today, the FBI told me the Zodiac killer case remains open and that there is no new information to share. I got the same response from Vallejo Police and the SFPD.